Good morning, my name's Malcolm Ellis. I'm the GM in New Zealand Markets here at LIC. I've come to LIC with a farm background, and my wife and I still own a dairy farm here in the Waikato in New Zealand. I've been at LIC for 10 years, and the first 5 years of that time I was involved in the breeding scheme with responsibility in the Jersey program as well as the short gestation genetics program. And I'd like to talk to you this morning about the value proposition that is SGL dairy. I see this as being a really important and a really valuable tool within seasonal pasture farming systems, irrespective of where you're farming around the world. Short gestation is a very simple trait, and hence the reason why LIC has been involved in an intensive breeding program with this trait for over 20 years now. The trait is 48% hereditable, which is approximately double the hereditability of a number of the other traits of interest in the bovine breeding programs. We've been involved in it for 20 years, as I say, and initially we were selecting from the most elite short gestation, or the shortest gestation females within the national herd. But some 10 or 12 years ago, we actually intensified that with our own intensive breeding program utilising embryo transfer technology. We also at that stage had the three breed groups, Holstein Friesian, Kiwi Cross and Jersey. But a key decision came 5 years ago when we rolled those three programs into one simple Kiwi Cross or one simple SGL dairy program so that we could drive the rate of genetic gain within this particular trait. Now, it is important to remember that there is no specific genetic merit other than the gestation length within this breeding program. So in other words, it is very, very focused on that one trait of short gestation. So we do not advise that these calves be reared as replacement animals for a productive life. I want to stress that there is absolutely no concern with the welfare or the viability of the calf, more just the fact that they've not been bred intensively for the components of milk production and fertility and other key traits on farm. Very, very specific to short gestation. What we've seen in New Zealand, and what I encourage the consideration around the world, is multiple uses of this product within an AB program. And I'd like to cover those four key areas off with you now. The first is identifying that there is a long tail to many of the bell-shaped curves of either genetic merit or productivity within individual herds around New Zealand and indeed around the world. What we find is that the deviation from the poorer quartile of cows compared to even the midpoint or the top half is quite extreme. And so an encouragement is to consider using SGL dairy on the lesser cows within the herd while we intensify the AB on a smaller group of animals of higher genetic merit, which drives the rate of genetic gain for the whole herd asset. Obviously, this can be intensified with the use of sex semen, because the moment we start contemplating 90% probability of a heifer calf from those most profitable and most advanced genetic merit animals, it allows us to free up some of the poor end of our herd asset to an alternative AB option, and in this case I'm encouraging that to be SGL dairy. The rates of advanced genetic and productive gain we see here in New Zealand from this practice is extreme, and that simply comes from identifying the sheer difference in merit between the top quartile of cows, where I'm encouraging us to be more intensive with our breeding of, compared to our bottom quartile of cows. The second value proposition for SGL dairy is taking the pressure off the run bull, or the group of bulls that are employed to be used after the standard AB period. In New Zealand, a standard mating regime, seasonal mating regime, may last for 10 weeks in total. Potentially the first 6 weeks are focused on that replacement activity. Following that, from week 6 to week 10, it is very common for a group of natural mated bulls to be employed to clean up the tail, if you like, or to get as many of those cows not pregnant at the end of the replacement AB period pregnant to avoid empty status. What we find in a lot of the analysis in our herds, and it will be the case around the world, is that actually very few cows get in calf from about week 8 through to week 10. And for those weeks of week 8, 9 and 10, it is often because of the fatigue and the sheer pressure that we put on our bulls because of the sheer weight of numbers that are not pregnant at the end of that AB period. What I strongly recommend as an option is that you complete the 6 weeks of AB, if that's the desired length of time, and then you put the bulls out for a period of 2 weeks. And then while those bulls are working intensively, it's giving the team on the farm, the human resource on the farm, a break from heat detection. And then when the bulls become slightly fatigued, pull the bulls out for a period of 2 weeks, re-engage heat detection aids or tail paint or the likes, so that we're able to rest the bulls while we are re-engaging AB to allow us to bring the bulls back for the last week or 10 days to be back in the right shape to be able to achieve high levels of pregnancies. We find this practice in New Zealand pastoral farms to be significantly improving pregnancy rates and strongly putting the focus on the fact that bull fatigue is in fact one of the main culprits for a less desirable reproductive performance on farm. So to summarise that second option, potentially 6 weeks of AB, followed by a couple of weeks, 2 weeks with the bulls, and then spell the bulls while you come back in for SGL dairy as an AB option, and then finish up at the end with the bull power. The third option and value proposition that I want to cover is what I call extending mating, but not extending calving. So if we go back to that graphic, looking at week 1 through to week 10, and whether or not we decide to spell the bulls in between or not, or it's just a standard 6 weeks of replacement AB, followed by 4 weeks of bull power, the consideration here is to, when you get to the end of that 10th week, I strongly suggest that you consider extending the mating period for a further 10 to 12 days with this SGL dairy product, which is now 21 to 22 days shorter. So it's got a gestation length breeding value of minus 22 days, which means that every pregnancy is going to calve 11 days earlier on farm. So by extending mating by an extra 10 to 12 days, I calculate that in a standard 500 cow pastoral seasonal farm with potentially 16% empties at the end, as I use as an example, 16% empties at the end of a 10-week mating period, it is conceivable that that empty rate will be reduced by approximately 3% by giving cows an extra period of 10 to 12 days to fall pregnant to short gestation genetics. The key though is it extends mating but doesn't extend the subsequent subsequent calving next year. Now, some of these cows that have conceived to this product will be later calving. I understand that. But some of them will be some of your most elite genetic merit animals that otherwise would have been wasted to the herd system and the farm system. At least this gives you the opportunity to be able to look and screen through the most elite animals of those late pregnancies and choose to retain them within the herd asset for the following year. We've run this practice on several commercial farms in New Zealand in the last 3 to 5 years. And as I said at the outset of this particular value proposition, it is very, very conceivable and very repeatable to be able to reduce that empty rate by around about 3%, which is significant and offers significant extra opportunities on farm. The fourth and final value proposition that I want to cover off is the increased number of farms that we're seeing around the world that are opting for what we call a no-bull mating system or mating program. So in other words, it is AB throughout, so that they are not bringing bulls onto the farm. In New Zealand, in recent times, we've seen this change because of biosecurity considerations, where farmers have been uncomfortable bringing foreign stock onto farms into what has otherwise been a closed farm and herd system. If you do choose to employ a no-bull farm system, then I genuinely believe that the SGL dairy product should be your product of choice beyond those first, say, 6 weeks is the example we've been using, the 6 weeks of desired replacement AB activity. Once you go beyond that and you're not employing the bulls, continuing with AB and using SGL dairy will give you an additional 11 to 12 days of lactation on each of the matings or each of the conceptions that are achieved during that period of, say, 4 weeks. This has many big benefits. Obviously, there is the obvious one of days in milk, but also the 11 to 12 additional days or earlier calving date for those cows mean that they have extra time, half a cycle extra time to recover from the rigour of calving, to better position them to be healthy and well set reproductively for the next mating season. On this context of no bull, we are also seeing a considerable wave of appetite in New Zealand and indeed around the world for wearable technology, whether they be smart ear tags or collar technology with pedometer-like technology that is used to obviously enhance a number of the farm management principles on farm around detection of ill health and the likes, but also obviously as a heat detection aid. If you are considering an investment in that type of technology, then I strongly recommend you consider SGL Dairy as your additional AB product of choice to follow your standard AB period. Because as I say, every additional conception that's achieved during that time will earn an additional 11 to 12 days of milk production, which is extremely valuable to all pastoral farm systems, irrespective of where they're practiced around the world. So in conclusion, I'm delighted to have had the opportunity to share some of this insight of this product. I think it is one of the simplest products on offer within the genetic space, but one that is not necessarily being well described from a value proposition perspective. It is a simple, no-nonsense opportunity to engage SGL genetics because it is such a simple, highly heritable trait. The prize is extra days in milk, and in certain examples that I've covered, advancements in some of the key KPIs within the reproductive consideration on farm, whether that be 6-week in calf rate or not in calf rate, or the all-important empty rate on farm. So a very simple product that can be very simply incorporated into your pastoral seasonal farm system. Thank you.